Hello, and thank you for joining us here again today. Today, we turn our minds to the world of artificial intelligence and its intersection with education. We're delighted to be joined by Tarek Jundi, the Chief Executive Officer of عنكبوت. Tarek, thank you for joining us and welcome to the show.
Thank you, Matthew. Thank you for having me.
Look, I think the first place where we have to start this conversation today is obviously in relation to the current climate we have in the Middle East. There's ongoing regional conflict going on, and in particular, in relation to education, there's obviously been some disruption when it comes to the school ecosystem. How does technology played a role in building that sort of resiliency in the education sector and helped withstand the pressures that we're seeing in the current market?
Absolutely, Matthew. If we're talking about the UAE in specific, and UAE has built resilient systems across the board with all sectors, education is no exception here. And when we speak about resiliency, we speak about running a national infrastructure, running a connected ecosystems, running remote learning capabilities, introducing AI, but also not only from a tools perspective, but also from a foundation, from a governance, and also from an ecosystem standpoint. So the whole country is running as usual, and education definitely is part of the full perspective of economy. And what we have done, for example, in عنكبوت, when we are part of the ecosystem, is the partnership we have just announced with WeVideo, is to enable remote learning, to enable institutions, enable the educators to leverage technology where they can have access to all the video adaptive learning tools to improve the engagement, to give back to community, and to be part, really small part of the community that trying really to stand together to ensure that we are resilient across the board.
This is obviously, unfortunately, not the first time that the UAE education system has had to undergo distance learning. It very famously happened a few years ago during COVID-19,
Yeah.
and tools were introduced really for the first time. Today, we sit in a completely different world when it comes to technology. Artificial intelligence, for instance, has become a byword. Everyone in the market is talking around it. How have these tools changed with relation to integration with AI? How has that changed the future of education, and how does that connect to some of the things you were just telling us about?
Actually, when we speak about AI, typically the conversation really focuses on tools, on models, on LLMs, etc., etc. Where reality is different, because the challenge is not with the tools and not with AI. The challenge is actually with the system itself, and education is the most important system. The way we look at education is not only about curriculum, because it's where talent is shaped, is where research is created, and where knowledge is actually aggregated and transferred. So when we look at the system here, the stronger the system is, okay, the stronger whatever we have built on top of it, whether AI, whether innovation, and whether entrepreneurship. And here, where let me give you an example. If in any mature ecosystem, mature countries usually, universities are not isolated. They are connected to its peers. They are connected to the government. They are connected to the industry. So when any breakthrough happens in any part of this chain, okay, it actually spreads quickly across the whole ecosystem. And this is, here the secret sauce of building a connected ecosystem, that, I mean, everything you run of it will be scaling and will be also sustainable.
I mean, talking about growing and scaling an ecosystem is a simple enough concept to understand, but that is not a simple enough idea in practice. How is the UAE going around building that education ecosystem? Where are the pushes and the levers coming from?
It's not secret that the UAE has very bold ambition. And this bold ambition is really not to be a consumer and user of technology, but to be a producer of knowledge and innovation. And this doesn't happen only through funding, okay? It happens through building a cohesive and end-to-end comprehensive ecosystem. That would require, when building the ecosystem, to build this to produce knowledge, to scale it, and also to export it, to be an international competitive player. And if I bring here another example, if there is any, let's say, research advancement in AI in one of the universities, if it's not shared with other entities, if it is not shared with industries or not shared with government to bring and to amplify the results, here, the impact will be very limited. Okay, but the UAE figured out how to fix it through running really a system, wide, digitally advanced ecosystem. If we look to bring another example as well, but actually on the contrary, if there is, let's say, an AI model was achieved in one of the universities for the healthcare sector, okay, if the data is securely shared, okay, if the model is trained across a broader data sets, okay, and if it's governed properly through the involvement of government, here we see an evolution. It's not anymore about a single project, it's about a national capability. So again, the discussion here will be shifted from, do we have a good university versus do we have a complete, great, competitive international ecosystem? And also to do so, and how we can enable this system-wide digital advancement is by ensuring that every institution is digitally mature on its own, okay? They're connected to national platform, and also, last but not least, they are sharing a common national infrastructure to make sure that all those best practices is leveraged and shared in the proper way.
Tarek, there's one thing you said in there which I found really interesting. I'm just going to ask you to expand on it slightly, which is when you say the UAE has bold ambitions, I agree. That's very obvious. But you mentioned this idea about exporting these technologies or this ecosystem. What would that actually look like in practice as an export?
Export of knowledge, export of talents, and also export of the complete end-to-end ecosystem, meaning that all the investment the UAE is doing in AI, it's actually it's not only about funding those big data centers or big AI GPU clusters. It's to enable the industries. Because UAE has, let's say, a very advanced oil and gas sector. When you connect industries to a research, okay, to a study, and you come up with a comprehensive, eventually a product that would solve a real problem solution or industry challenge, you can export this internationally. So here you're exporting the package, not exporting only, let's say, a curriculum, or not exporting only a knowledge, exporting an ecosystem of solutions that would enable companies to scale. We see today startups actually being incorporated in the UAE. We've never seen this before. We've seen international startups actually having headquartered and actually recruiting talents here in the region. So we don't live in an isolated environment anymore. We should interact with all those best practices, interact with international dynamics, interact with our peers. And this is where having a national infrastructure, what we call it NREN, National Research Education Network, which is connected to whether Internet 2 in the US, whether GEONT in Europe, this will make sure that we operate at the same level of innovation and the same level of knowledge transfer.
I'm a bit of a layman here when it comes to how technology can integrate into education. So forgive me my own ignorance. What exactly would these tools of the future and this technology look like in an education in the context of education? How will artificial intelligence actually change education? How will that impact distance learning? I just want to know specifically what these tools will look like.
Yeah. So the tools is scattered across all possible use cases. So you can implement AI in student admission system. You can apply AI on analytics for research environment. You can apply AI for crowd management in a campus. Okay, but when you apply them and the systems itself, they are segregated and disconnected, the impact will be very much limited. So you can see, let's say, in most institutions, they have multiple, redundant systems. They have multiple data foundation layers, and they have multiple experiences. When I say experience, is the journey that any students actually will go through or educator will go through, all fragmented, okay? So I bring AI and introduce AI, as I said, to student affairs, or I introduce automation into operation. But since those systems are fragmented, okay, the impact of AI will be very limited, because the AI will be more powerful when you have a holistic, connected ecosystem. If we look at things actually the other way around, imagine a unified environment, okay, where you have one common data platform, when you have one um, uh, uh, unified, seamless digital experience across, let's say, one super app that the students could really check their grades, change, temperature of the room. They can even pay their fees in a seamless digital experience from one platform. Imagine a situation where you have real-time analytics that runs constantly across the whole life cycle of a student. Here, where AI really could help us ensure that we have a customized learning experience. We have predictable student success and student performance. We have, as well, very importantly, alignment between learning and the job market. So this is where you see the real impact, not only with the tools, but also with this orchestration layer.
Sounds like here you're really banging the drum for this idea of building a unified ecosystem to beat this idea of fragmentation.
Absolutely.
I do have one question for you in that context, though. I mean, I've spoken to many people who work directly in this technology as well, with AI or big technology corporates. And one thing these guys tend to say when they're speaking honestly is keeping up with the technology themselves is a massive challenge. I mean, it is moving so incredibly fast. How do you go around building a unified platform, a unified ecosystem for a technology that is moving at almost unprecedented speed?
Excellent question, Matthew. We go back to basics. Build your foundation properly, okay? Everything will be built as a puzzle. Today, you have data everywhere. You have data in your learning management system. You have data in your building management system. You have data in your ERP, your CRM. So every time you want to introduce any AI use case, it will take forever, because the data is not data is fragmented. The data is not structured. Okay, and what we are doing here by going back to basics is actually breaking down the barriers between all those applications, building connectors and applications APIs, okay, to allow the data to move seamlessly. So we're building this foundation of data consolidated. So the time to introduce any AI use case will be much faster. So whatever technology would evolve, we have our consolidated system, we have our foundation. So you can build anything, whatever it comes, AI, machine learning, whatever the new innovation or the new invention would be. Our basics is built right, and we're ready for any new technology.
So the idea is clean up all the data so that you can then use it in whatever use case turns up along the way.
Absolutely.
Again, turning back to this idea of the UAE's own ambitions.
Yeah.
The leadership of the UAE is incredibly ambitious and have set very ambitious goals, and they tend to put their money where their mouth is, and they make the effort to hit those goals.
Yeah.
There's a very strong top-down leadership pushing for success in education and in technology. Absolutely agree with you there. What's your feeling on this bottom-down approach? And there's two parts to this. On the institutions themselves, I'm talking about universities, schools, and educators, but also for students. Do you see an acceptance of this kind of technology in education? Are they primed for it here in the UAE more uniquely than elsewhere in the world? Or is there still some sort of trepidancy about embracing these tools?
You'll be surprised that students are ahead of us, always ahead of us, because they are the ones who are experimenting with tools every day. Gen Z, Gen Alpha, they are demanding the change of the system. They're demanding the connectivity. They're demanding what apps they want to see. So I guess it's like top down, but also bottom up in some areas. And you are right, because the leadership sets the strategic direction. But where challenges usually lie is not with the vision, is with execution. Okay, and here where are most challenges we see and we try to tackle, because to manage this execution right, you need really to have an integration capabilities, interoperability capabilities, a vision really to seamlessly connect and build AI-enabled platforms. So here exactly what we're trying to do as Ankabut is try to be the execution agent for this ambitious vision when it comes to enabling education, really not only to support the economy, but also to play a major role in cross-sectors innovation and cross-sector transformation, because it starts with education and it ends with education. And for me, education is not what we used to call as education 1.0 is like about certificate and degree. This is behind us. It is about an experience, it's about the skills. And it's not always about 3, 4 years, 5 years, and you study. No, it's about lifelong journey. And we're here to enabling the lifelong journey. This is where we need to keep this channel open with the consumers of technology, with the students, educators, and while aligning with the vision of the country.
Just to ask you on a point there, you said education 1.0 is certificates. Which education 0.0 are we up to at this point?
I think we are evolving from 1.0, because I believe that certification alone will not last, will not be enough. If we don't equip our next generation with the right skills and with the right experience, they will be challenged to find the right career path. And here where, again, the ecosystem has to evolve. And the ecosystem has to develop also post-education type of engagements. And technology here will ensure that there is a sector in technology called continuing education. And in Ankabut, we are dividing the market into those 3 areas: K-12, higher education and research centers, and continuing education. And real impact will be in the continuing education, because it will never stop with only the certificate if we don't support it with the right internship, the right on-job training, the right enablement of this workforce. Again, this is what the UAE is trying to do, to export talent as well, not only to import talent but to export talent. And we cannot do it without evolving from education 1.0 to education 2.0.
I mean, it's the reason why I asked that is because I think there's this interesting argument to be made that education is a bit of a weird sector in comparison to most of the rest of the world.
Yes.
If you went into a classroom 100 years ago, you'd still find a teacher at the front and students sat in the classroom. If you look at any other sector in the economy, they've all been transformed. There's been massive productivity gains.
Yes.
But really, education has not changed fundamentally. Obviously the way we teach subjects, but from a fundamental level, it's still a teacher at the front and X number of students in the class. What does the classroom of the future in education 2.0 look like?
It is evolving as we speak, Matthew. It will never be only a classroom. As we speak, we have invented what we call AI tutor, where the time of professors or the time of the teacher will not be spent on explaining the content to students. They can do it on their own. Okay, the time of the professors or the teacher will be spent on projects, will be spent on enablement, will be spent on collaboration. And even the students could run their own exams remotely through AI, what we call it AI tutor tool. So evolution from classroom based, what we mean by the future of education is about high performance computing. Okay, it's about access to compute power. It's about access to connectivity. It's about access to AI-enabled platforms. If you bring in another dimension here, which is the campus itself, whether it's a school campus or whether it's a university campus, when you bring in intelligence into the equation, then you can get into, energy system, sustainability. You can get into space utilization intelligently. You can get into improving security. So this is the elements of the smart campus. You combine it with the consolidated data layer. You add to it the unified digital experience. Here where, bingo, you reach what we call a unified digital ecosystem for education. So you see the evolution from one, student and teacher classroom type of setup to a complete transformed ecosystem and industry.
Right. You referred to yourselves, عنكبوت, earlier as the execution agent of the vision.
Yeah.
One thing that I'm very sure about is being the execution agent is not a cheap thing to do.
Yeah.
So, performing any large-scale transformation is an expensive operation. I'm not just referring to you in this question, but how is the UAE going around financing this? Is the investment there? How are investors approaching it? What does that look like?
It's not cheap, but also the potential is huge. And also, if we are to execute on the vision to export knowledge and to export success, that means we need to expand beyond the borders of UAE. And this is exactly our vision. So you have a 5 years vision today, starting with enabling and acting as the edtech service provider of choice for the UAE. Okay. Second, we are expanding regionally as well, because when you build capabilities and when you build scalability, you need to travel with it, and you can travel domestically through the region GCC, and then you can go on a worldwide basis. That's exactly what we are doing. So we are growing organically, and also we're going through acquisition. So part of our ambition, our plan is also to acquire startups or companies and invest in innovation that either will give us access to market or access to technology or access to talent, or all of them at the same time. And this is where we're heading. And to be honest, once you mature in building platforms, and platforms here, they have a vertical characteristic and they have horizontal characteristic. When you build this foundation of horizontal characteristic, you can scale to adjacent sectors as well. Healthcare, for example, because school is a clinic, hospital is a university. In terms of like the engagement, of course, technology could have different distinguished services when it comes to the vertical aspect of any platform. So back to the investments here, it is private sector investments, it's government investments, and also very important is we are owned as عنكبوت by KUAC, which is an incubator and accelerator for startups. So we invest in IPs, we invest in patents that comes out of any research institution in the region here. We invest in them. We have incubation programs to help them be sustainable startups. Then عنكبوت will take them and to be their go-to-market engine to scale, whether the UAE or abroad.
As you say, it's about helping to build the ecosystem there.
100%.
Last couple of questions for you. I think there's a growing concern when it comes to artificial intelligence around trust. I think it was Dario Asmodee, the CEO of Claude, who recently said to the New York Times that he actually sees there being, to a certain degree, a backlash to AI technology in 2029.
Yeah.
How do you go around building this kind of ecosystem in a sector like education, which has its own unique challenges in terms of trust? We're dealing with kids and students, and maintain that trust and security throughout the whole project and through building the ecosystem?
Very good question, Matthew. And actually, it resonates very well with what's happening, on a worldwide basis and also here in the country. So the more AI is embedded within education, okay, the more the conversation is evolving beyond capabilities. It's about ownership, it's about control, it's about the risk, okay? Because here we're dealing with the most sensitive data, the students' data, okay? It is, organization has to rethink, okay, about how they are managing their data, how they are governing their system, and how they are allocating resources. Because in this AI journey, we tend to really jump ahead of ourselves with innovation, ahead of governance, ahead with the right foundation. Okay, so the risk is here will be mitigated by building a trusted sovereign, okay, AI-enabled infrastructure, and that's not to slow innovation or prohibit innovation, but rather to help innovation really be sustainable and be secured on the long run. This is exactly what we're doing in عنكبوت, because we have a national sovereign cloud services and AI services to ensure that the governance is embedded. Without a governance, without a data management, okay, and data structure, all the outcome of AI will not be credible, right? Without having governance in place, the risk will be increased, okay? So we need to make sure that, number one, we are investing in the right infrastructure. We are building this consolidated data platform, and we are building a framework for governance. If we do so, I think the risk will be mitigated.
The idea of sovereignty, I think, is
Sovereignty
very,
is
very interesting.
absolutely, yeah.
Look, last thing just to ask you there is, it would be remiss of me not, especially given the current context we're in, just to ask about what the future looks like for you and for عنكبوت over the next year.
Yeah.
Where you're predicting, where your growth plans are, and how you see the future unfolding.
We are investing in our own products and in our own IP. That's one area of growth. And also we're investing in partnership and bringing international best practice and ecosystem into the country, like the partnership that we have announced with WeVideo. When it comes to our own IP and our product, we're investing in today 3 main areas. It's about smart campus, and we call it an AI digital operating system of the universities, because this is where you can build this foundation. Second is building data products and framework to consolidate this fragmented ecosystem. And last but not least, we're building a digital experience platform, عنكبوت DXP. This is where you'll have one centralized super app with a unified journey for students, unified journey for educators, and unified journey for staff. These are the 3 areas of technology that we're investing in, okay? Geographically speaking, when we reach the status of the EdTech service provider of choice for the UAE, this could be like maybe 18 months from now. As I mentioned before, we're going also through acquisition to other countries, and also in maybe 4 years from now, we will evolve into other sectors. Try to leverage all those best practices we've built and enable it in other sectors. There is one strong proposition for us, that we were born in education. So we understand education as, it's our DNA. So when we bring in innovation, we bring it out of a real challenge that we have lived, a real need that we see. So it's actually, we're very close to the environment that would make any solution we introduce is very, adaptable, very scalable, and also, as I said, because of the security concerns, is very sovereign.
Well, I mean, look, watching these things happen in education is going to be absolutely fascinating. I'm sure I speak with everyone when we'll be very excited to see what happens. Tarek, it only exists to thank you for your time today and for joining us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Matthew. Thank you very much.